In this video, I want to talk about this type of notch at the bottom of the stair stringer. And I noticed that people still do it. I don't think they're ever going to stop doing it. You know, we watch, as do-it-yourselfers, we watch a video or we look at one of our neighbor's stairs and we say, okay, well, this is how it's supposed to be done. And it makes sense. And I'm here to say that I've never used this method, and the reason you'll see the reasons in the rest of the video, but I just don't think it's a good method. And I've seen it, people use it on concrete also. If you're going to use it on a wood frame floor, it's not going to be that big of a deal as long as the risers aren't very small, and you'll see that towards the end of the video. So let's go ahead and get started with, if you have a situation like this on concrete, and I've seen this plenty of times, that's why I'm bringing it up, they'll have a treated piece of lumber here, and then the stringer just sits directly on the concrete and, of course, rots over time. And I've just seen this too many times. And, you know, keep in mind that I was the one that was repairing a lot of this stuff. That's where I got a lot of my knowledge from. And for those of you out there who aren't doing a lot of stair repairs, pay attention. This is one of the reasons why I don't like this particular method. Instead, I would suggest doing something like this, where you have two pieces of treated lumber, and the treated lumber is going to provide you with the protection you need, I should say most of the time. The stringers, it'll protect the stringers from the moisture that could be absorbed out of the concrete. And that, of course, is how the wood rots when it's sitting directly on top of concrete and it's not the correct pressure treated lumber. Then water can easily get absorbed into the wood stair stringer and rot the stringer, and of course then it would need to be replaced, or at least the bottom of it would need to be cut off so that you could install something like this. So this is something that I think is going to work better than the other method when you're attaching it to concrete. Now, what if we go ahead and cut the stringer a little shorter to keep the concrete away from the wood? And this is a good idea, right? You can take something like this and you are no longer going to have any contact with the concrete, unless, of course, some type of debris gets built up underneath that. And I've seen that happen a lot. So something like this might be a good idea as long as this doesn't happen. The possibility of it cracking. And this isn't going to happen all the time. This is just a possibility. Again, I'm not suggesting that you cannot build a set of stairs with any of these methods, but I am trying to provide you with a few problems that you could run into. And these are actually problems I've ran into building without this. I've had stairs that the floor might have been a little out of level to where it's sitting just right on the tip here is where full bearing of the stringer is, and there's a gap underneath it. And as people walk up and down them, they can actually break like this also. But you can imagine with a larger gap that the possibility is going to increase, because all of the weight for the stairway is going to be right over this section. It is not going to be over here, and this is actually where it should be. So the grain of the lumber is what's going to create the cracks. The grain usually runs in this direction for most of the lumber that is construction standard lumber. You're rarely going to find it running in the other direction, maybe in plywood. But if it's running in this direction and it's got a little crack in it already, or the lumber hasn't dried out enough, you're using wet lumber, and it dries out and starts to crack, this right here is inevitable. Now, this isn't going to be that big of a deal if you're going to be attaching it to a wood floor, because you'll be able to set the lumber on top of it. It'll have full bearing. Now, it might not work very good if you have small risers. So if you can imagine a 5-inch riser, you subtract 1.5 inches from it here. This piece is now going to be 3.5 inches. And then with a 3.5 inch piece and the grains of the stringer running this way. If the lumber's dry enough, right conditions, you're going to split this. Now, is it going to be that big of a problem for a situation where the stringer is like this and it's full bearing on the floor? No, the problem would only be is if you had a gap here and the crack somehow disfigured the stairway to where it would be out of level. Here's a method I would suggest if you're going to be attaching the stringers to subflooring. I've done this plenty of times. Just simply cut the stringers to where they sit on the floor, full bearing. And then you can put some blocks in here if you want. I didn't put any blocks in. I would just toenail it on each side. Maybe put 2 toenails going, 2 on the right side, 2 on the left side. And that was usually enough for me. And if you want, you could put the blocks in and drive some end nails in. And don't forget that you could always use the same method as we used for attaching it to concrete. You might have a problem with the subfloor. You might not have enough nailing for your stringers in it. So you could always run construction standard 2x4s. They would not need to be treated if you're using wood-to-wood contact, but you could always have the 2x4s as I've shown you in the other part of the video where it attached to the concrete, and the stringers of course can always sit on top of the 2x4s that would run underneath them.